Two left-handed players walked into the Porsche Arena last week and did the exact same thing to each other for 88 minutes. Leylah Fernandez said afterward it was like playing a mirror. And somewhere in that sentence lives the most interesting problem in women's tennis right now, because the mirror lost. Alex Eala went down 6-1, 6-4 to Fernandez in Stuttgart, her third consecutive clay court loss, counting the Ostapenko defeat in Linz. And she walks into the Madrid Open this week carrying a 1-2 record on the dirt in 2026. On paper, that looks like a player who doesn't belong on clay. In practice, I think the paper is lying to you. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly how far I believe Alex Eala can go at the WTA Madrid Open, and why the answer might surprise the people who stopped watching after that Stuttgart scoreline. Let me set the table first, because context matters here more than anywhere else. Eala's 2026 season on hard courts was nothing short of remarkable for a 20-year-old who started the year ranked 138 in the world. She opened with a semi-final run at the ASB Classic in Auckland, pushing Wang Xinyu to 3 sets after beating Donna Vekic and Magda Linette on the way there. Then she reached the quarterfinals in Abu Dhabi before the real fireworks started. In Dubai, she put together a statement win over world number 8 Jasmine Paolini 6-1, 7-6, the kind of scoreline that doesn't happen by accident against a player who made 2 Grand Slam finals in 2024. That was her third career top 10 victory. The first 2 came last year, Madison Keys and Iga Swiatek in Miami, during the semi-final run that announced her to the world. At Indian Wells, she beat Diana Yastremska in a nail-biter, nearly midnight under the California lights, before Linda Noskova ended her run with a clinical 6-2, 6-0. Then in Miami, seeded 31st, she survived a 3-hour 20-minute war with Laura Siegemund, dispatched Linette again, and reached the round of 16 before Karolina Muchova administered a 6-0, 6-2 reality check. That Muchova loss is instructive. Not because Eala played badly, Muchova simply played at a level that would have beaten most people on tour that day, winning 80% of first serve points. But because it exposed the same structural gap that shows up every time Eala faces a player who can simultaneously attack her serve and hold their own service games under pressure. Her service game's won percentage currently sits at 64.7%, which ranks her toward the bottom of the top 60. She's hit 17 aces all season against 61 double faults. That imbalance tells you everything about the tension inside her game. She is elite at making the other player uncomfortable but vulnerable to anyone who can reverse that dynamic. Which brings us to clay, and more specifically, to why I think Madrid is different from Linz and Stuttgart for Alex Eala. Start with the losses. In Linz, she beat Julia Grabher comfortably in round 1 6-4, 6-3, with genuinely encouraging serving numbers, 60% first serve in, 68% of those points won, and 9 of 10 break points saved. That's not the profile of someone whose serve crumbles on clay. Then Ostapenko happened. Yelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion who just won the Stuttgart title last year beating Swiatek and Sabalenka in succession, someone who hits the ball harder and flatter than almost anyone on tour. Someone who turns clay into a hard-court shootout by sheer force of will. Eala lost that match 4-6, 5-7, and she had her moments. It wasn't a capitulation. Stuttgart was harder to defend. Fernandez won the first 5 games and never let Eala settle into any kind of rhythm. The forehand dictated everything. Eala won just 46 of 109 points, 42%, and on indoor clay, against another left-hander with similar instincts, she looked like she was perpetually half a step behind. But here's the thing that gets lost in the scoreline. Fernandez's own coach told her before the end of the match that Eala would not go down easy. And in the second set, Eala did find a way to make it competitive, breaking back, climbing to 4-4 before Fernandez pulled away. That second set told a different story than the first. Now, Madrid. The WTA Madrid Open is a WTA 1000 event with a 96-player draw, and it runs from April 21st to May 3rd at the Caja Magica. Eala enters as an unseeded direct entrant, currently ranked 45th. The draw hasn't been released yet, but let me walk you through what we know and what we can infer. First, and this is the most underappreciated factor, Eala actually has history in Madrid. She's played 6 matches there across previous editions, going 2-4. That record doesn't jump off the page, but among those losses was last year's second round against Iga Swiatek, where Eala took the opening set 6-4 against the defending champion and 4-time French Open winner before Swiatek adjusted and took the match in 3. That performance on that surface against that opponent, in those conditions, deserves more weight than a round 2 exit normally gets. Eala proved she could sustain a high level on Madrid's specific brand of clay long enough to take a set from one of the 3 or 4 best clay court players alive. And Madrid's clay is not Rome's clay. It's not Roland Garros clay. This is a critical distinction. The Caja Magica sits at roughly 650 meters above sea level. The thinner air means the ball travels faster, bounces higher, and the court plays quicker than any other major clay event on the calendar. The serve gets a boost. The flatter ball striking that Eala naturally gravitates toward the same flat, fast hitting that Fernandez described as looking in a mirror actually works in Madrid in a way it doesn't work in Linz or Stuttgart or anywhere else on the European clay swing. Madrid is the tournament where big servers historically overperform on clay. It's the tournament where aggressive returners find extra time because the ball sits up more. For a player whose entire identity is built on return pressure and fast-twitch ball striking, but whose serve has been the albatross around her competitive ceiling, Madrid's altitude provides a partial environmental correction. Let me put numbers to this. Eala's first serve speed has improved in 2026. She was clocked at 105 miles per hour during Indian Wells, up from routinely serving below 90 during the 2025 season. Tennis Head reported on the improvement back in February. Martina Navratilova identified the serve as the key area for growth. Toni Nadal, who watched over Eala's clay preparation at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca in late March and early April, would certainly have addressed it. At altitude, that 105 becomes functionally closer to 110 in terms of how opponents perceive the ball's arrival. It doesn't erase the deficit, but it narrows it. And at her level, narrowing it by even a few percentage points changes which matches she can steal. Now let's talk about the return game, because this is where Eala becomes genuinely dangerous regardless of surface. She ranked 5th on the entire WTA Tour in return games won percentage during the 2025 season. That's not a misprint. 5th on tour, ahead of players with 4 times her experience. Her ability to read serve patterns, position aggressively inside the baseline, and convert early in return games is a legitimate world-class skill. On clay, where the serve is already somewhat neutralized by the surface's natural friction, that return game should theoretically shine even brighter. The problem in Linz and Stuttgart was that she didn't hold serve often enough for her return breaks to build into set leads. In Madrid, the altitude gives her serve just enough teeth to hold more frequently, which means her return breaks actually accumulate into something structural rather than getting immediately cancelled out. And then there's the coaching setup. Eala arrived at the Rafa Nadal Academy in early April and spent roughly a week doing twice-daily sessions with her team, Sandro Veen handling on-court strategy, Joan Bosch as the long-term technical coach, Luc Bauza managing fitness, and Toni Nadal overseeing the entire operation. In her own words, the focus was on feeling the ball, moving well, and she specifically said she's moving better on clay than she did in 2025. The transition from flat, fast hard court striking to the higher net clearance and increased topspin required on clay was the primary training emphasis. That's not the kind of generic preparation language you hear from a player going through the motions. That's targeted work. Here's where my prediction gets specific. Eala has very few ranking points to defend on clay. Across the entire surface, her 2025 haul was just 70 points, 15 from Oeiras, 35 from Madrid, 10 from Rome, 10 from Roland Garros. That means even a modest improvement translates directly into a ranking surge. A third-round run in Madrid would be worth significantly more than anything she accomplished on clay last year. A fourth-round run would catapult her back toward that career high of 29. The incentive structure is enormously favorable. But let's be realistic about what stands in her way. The Madrid draw is stacked. Sabalenka leads the field as the defending champion and world number one. Swiatek, Gauff, Rybakina, Pegula, Muchova, Andreeva, the entire top tier of women's tennis is present. If the 2025 draw is any guide, Eala could conceivably land in Swiatek's section again. She could face Ostapenko, who has already beaten her on clay this year. She could draw Fernandez, who just dissected her game 5 days ago. My read is this: Eala's ceiling at the Madrid Open is the 4th round, and her floor is a first-round exit. That's a wide range, but it reflects where she actually is as a player right now, capable of beating almost anyone on a given day, but also capable of being overwhelmed when her serve buckles early and the opponent refuses to let her return game carry the match. I think she gets through the first round. Madrid is familiar territory. The conditions help her, and unless she draws a nightmare opener, she should be competitive against anyone ranked outside the top 20. I think she wins in the second round, too, potentially against a mid-tier seed who struggles with left-handed angles and that relentless return pressure. The third round is where it gets interesting, because that's likely where she hits a top 15 opponent, and her record against that tier is mixed. She's beaten Paolini, Keys, Swiatek. She's been demolished by Gauff, twice, 0-6, 2-6 in Dubai, 0-6, 6-2 in Indian Wells, Noskova, 6-2, 6-0, and Muchova, 6-0, 6-2. The common thread in those losses is opponents who can load up on her second serve and hold their own delivery comfortably, taking her return game out of the equation by simply not giving her anything to work with. My prediction: Alex Eala reaches the third round of the Madrid Open, and there's a legitimate puncher's chance she makes the fourth. Here's why I land there and not higher. The serve issue doesn't disappear at altitude, it gets softened, but against a Sabalenka or a Muchova, softened isn't enough. She still needs to find 15 to 20 free points per match from her service games that she currently gives away, and that's a mechanical problem that altitude alone can't solve. Her movement on clay, by her own admission, is improved but not yet instinctive. She's been on the surface for 3 competitive matches, and the last 2 were losses. The feel isn't there yet. And Madrid's draw depth means there's no easy quarter to hide in. But here's why I won't go lower. Eala has 6 matches of institutional memory at this venue. She knows the courts, the conditions, the ballroom, the logistics. That matters more than people realize at a WTA 1000, where every unseeded player is navigating an unfamiliar environment. She took a set off the defending champion on this exact surface 12 months ago. Her serve has objectively improved. Her coaching team specifically prepared for clay court conditions. She has almost nothing to lose in the rankings and everything to gain. And most importantly, the return game, the thing she does better than all but a handful of players on the entire tour, gets amplified on a surface that already reduces serve dominance, and further amplified by altitude that gives her more time to set up on the return. There's a version of events where Eala draws favorably, serves well for 2 rounds, gets a third-round opponent who struggles to hold serve, and suddenly she's in the second week of a WTA 1000 on clay carrying serious confidence. I wouldn't bet on it, but I also wouldn't bet against it. That's the maddening thing about where she sits right now. She's good enough to do real damage and fragile enough to lose in 60 minutes. The player Fernandez described as a mirror is 20 years old, ranked 45th in the world, training with Tony Nadal's operation, and carrying 3 career top 10 wins. 12 months ago, she was ranked 138th. The trajectory is extraordinary even when the individual results stutter. Madrid won't tell us everything about Alex Eala's future on clay, but it will tell us something important about whether the return game that makes her special translates to the surface that punishes her weakness least, or whether the serve that holds her back is still, even at altitude, even in April in Spain, the thing that defines her ceiling. I'm going third round. And if you're watching the draw drop later this week, look for where Eala lands. Because wherever she is, that section of the bracket just got a lot more interesting.